Hi, I'm Greg Lobbs, the Civilization V Community Manager here at 2K Games, bringing you an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at the making of Civilization V. With over 9 million units sold worldwide, resounding critical acclaim, and multiple awards to its name, Civilization is recognized as one of the greatest strategy franchises of all time. To bring this series into its fifth offering takes the diverse skills of the talented people at Firaxis Games. During this video, we'll explore the history of the Civilization franchise, get a closer look at the team that created the fifth iteration in this revolutionary series, and learn more about what brought Civilization V to life.
Civilization was originally created at Microprose in the late 1980s. The idea was actually inspired by a couple things. A lot of us were playing SimCity at the time, and we kind of really enjoyed that idea of building something instead of blowing something up. That was kind of a new idea. You'd actually create something of your own design, and that was attractive. We'd actually done a game just a little bit before that called Railroad Tycoon, which had a few of the elements of Civilization. There was building, there was kind of a combination of various systems, economic, competition, all those kind of things. And we kind of liked the way that game felt. It had a kind of God aspect to it. It was creative, it was building. But we said, what's a bigger topic that we could approach, with these kind of ideas? And Civilization kind of came to us. What if you were conquering the entire world, building a civilization to stand the test of time? And all these cool things we could include, technology, history, military conquest, politics, culture, diplomacy. It just seemed like a very rich topic to approach with this idea of starting small, but then by the end of the game having gone through this kind of epic journey to create a unique story of your own. So that was kind of the genesis of the original Civilization, which came out in the late 80s. Really had no idea whether it was going to be a success or a failure, or were we kind of on the wrong track. And it actually took a couple months before we started to get some really good feedback from our players. In those days there was no internet, so actual letters written on paper came to us, and people said, hey, I like this game. It was fun. It's new. I can't stop playing. That was the new thing for us. We started hearing about all these stories about players that couldn't stop, had to play one more turn, and that was really an indication that we were kind of onto something with this style of game and this approach. Civilization II, which came out next, was actually designed by Brian Reynolds. He went off to England for a year. His wife had an opportunity to teach there. He came back essentially with Civilization II. There were a lot of really kind of innovative new features there. I think that the modding is the one that we all remember, the ability to kind of create your own scenarios and change the game. And that really gave Civilization II a very long life cycle, because it was constantly being refreshed by the community. And we learned another lesson there, the whole idea of how, if we could, every Civilization player is kind of a wannabe designer in a lot of ways. And a lot of our letters reflected that. It was like, hey, Sid, I liked your game Civilization, but here are the 5 things I would change about it. For some reason, Civilization kind of brought out the inner designer in most of our players. So modding really allowed players to experiment with that and do that. Civilization III came out after we'd formed Firaxis, and a lot of wild and crazy things had happened with the Civilization franchise. Called it Power had come out. It was, for a while, we actually never thought we'd do another Civilization game, and then the stars aligned, and we were given the opportunity to do Civilization III, and that was a fun thing to kind of come back to that after we'd been away for a while. With all the versions, we try and do some new things, add new features, but keep the core intact, and that's always a balancing act that we kind of spend a lot of time discussing, really involve the community in that discussion. With Civ 3, for the first time, we had the internet to kind of put us in touch with players. We got a lot of ideas from them, and we actually established a beta testing group that helped us with testing a lot of our ideas. So much more of a community-oriented game. Civilization 4, we turned Soren Johnson loose on Civilization, and he kind of gave his take on it. Some of the emphases there were multiplayer. Kind of for the first time, we really focused on that from the beginning of the game. With Civ 5, we're building on a lot of those ideas and adding a lot of new ideas. John Schaefer, who's leading that design, kind of threw away a lot of the old paradigms and put in a lot of his own. And so it's kind of an opportunity to try a lot of new things and come up with a fresh take on Civilization.
I was just another player of the game not too long ago. Just like everybody else, I bought the Civ games and played them and said, oh, this sucks, I wish I could change this. And then, by luck or fate or what have you, I had the opportunity to actually go and take the reins and do a lot of things that I wanted to do. And it's been really exciting. It's been very challenging, but very rewarding as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
Another major change in Civilization 5 is a switch from large stacks of units to only allowing 1 unit per tile.
Very early on, there were some changes made to the gameplay that we were excited about. We wanted to make it a hex-based game, and we were going to limit it to 1 unit per tile. And the goal for that was, in previous Civ titles, the only square that really mattered was where your city was, and a lot of gameplay would be dictated on where each city was, and we were trying to make every tile very important. Once we switched to hexes, we realized everything could change visually. We could have a much more organic world.
So hexes do a few different things for us that we're really happy about. First off, they help us on the gameplay side. What that means is there are no diagonals on the corners, which means that there's no advantages in terms of movement and visibility. Anybody who's played a lot of Civ knows that that's kind of the best way to play the game, and it's constantly ingrained in the way that you approach it. So we wanted to remove that bias and kind of make every move equal in a way. Additionally, it helps us on the graphics side as well. Because there are no corners, 90-degree angles aren't very nice to look at, so we can make the maps look a lot more organic and free-flowing, and it improves the look and feel of the game as well. So the hexes do a couple really big things for us.
We went for a really realistic style for Civ 5 with the units. Both Mike and I appreciate more realistic type of games and realistic type of art. Our lead artist, Dorian Newcomb, said we wanted a classical type approach to this game. So we went for more realistic, historically inspired assets. Mike designed a lot of the modern units down here, and I did more of the ancient, medieval, and industrial units. We use color to make the units distinct through the types of metal and the kind of armor they use. For instance, the spearmen would use a bronze color to indicate the kind of armor that they used and the kind of weapons they had, where the later units, the knight has the strong steel, stronger colors. And then each unit will have team color based on whatever civilization you have.
Well, every time we get a unit to do, we go into research mode and we just go through everything that we have, internet, everything else we have, and we just try to pick the more archetypal version of whatever we're in, whether it's the pikeman or the modern tank or something like that. We do a lot of research because people will look at that and a lot of people will know if it's accurate or not. So.
A unit that I really loved that came out great was the battleship. We redesigned the battleship for this game after the USS Iowa. It was a battleship, and we saw one of them in New Jersey, not too far away. The USS New Jersey is on display, and it's an Iowa-class battleship. Trying to get that many guns packed into a small little unit was a great challenge, and Jason Guy did a great job. Mike helped with the concept for that at all. Something interesting, because the ship is so long, we modeled it at real scale, but once we saw it in the game, we realized it was too big for a hex. So we actually had to squish it down 80%. So it's a little squat, but it still looks really good in the game.
Probably the most interesting thing I did was actually do the mech, which appears at the end of the game. It's probably the ultimate land unit that you can get. It's more powerful than anything on the land, and that was fun to design. The first Civilization game to have a mech was Beyond the Sword, and that's when we first introduced that. So I think we wanted to include this one in the game this time. So basically, after building all the tank units and that sort of thing that are in the game, all the armor units, I was tasked out with doing the mech. So that was really like a nice little piece to do. So basically, the concept is basically a walking tank. And we didn't want it to be really deviate from looking like a tank. We didn't want this like Japanimation kind of round thing in there. We wanted something that was blocky and looked like a tank, and also had more weapons than anything on the ground too. We wanted it to look like it had a full arsenal. So
What I think is cool about the mech is that Mike really drew from real world inspiration, and anything drawn from the real world, the player can relate to more readily. This cannon on top, it's really inspired by the 30 Mike gun on an Apache gunship, but for our uses, it's a railgun for our game, and you'll see it in the game, and it's awesome. It destroys everything else. And we also have this bank of Hellfire missiles here. We have smoke launchers. We have different kinds of sensors and eyepieces that people can look at and relate to. There's some hydraulics and heavy metal features that make this thing feel realistic and really believable. I think Mike did a great job designing something that looks believable.
One big challenge for the artists was creating the realistic leaders that the player would interact with throughout the game.
When we started looking at the experience of single player playing the game of Civ, and they'd meet a leader, we knew that we wanted that to be an exciting experience. Meeting Ramses should feel awesome, and you should feel like you went back to ancient Egypt. And because we were looking at historical fiction and looking at a lot of films, a lot of times there are great throne room scenes where you're in the presence of that leader, and it feels exotic and foreign and rich. And so we had our concept artists do what we would call, gunslinger shots, from the mid-thigh up, of meeting these people and being in the presence of their throne. We played around a lot with populating them with people. We were going to have Caesar in a Senate filled with people walking around. As the budget started to come in, we realized maybe having hundreds of people in these scenes wouldn't add a lot and would take away from that leader confronting you. And then we decided to have them speak in their language, so that when you did meet with Caesar, he'd be in his Senate and he'd be speaking Latin. We would provide a translation so you could actually communicate with him. But we thought that would be cool. That's the whole point of playing Civilization, is to experience history. And what better way than to meet people from lost civilizations and languages that aren't spoken anymore?
Well, in Civ 4, they didn't speak at all. And we did have sort of a sim-style voices in Civ Rev. For Civ 5, we just figured that real language would set the tone a little more, would fit in with the game a little more. And it's something I've always wanted to see. I think it's really cool. You really get it further gives you that sense of the culture. Just like I think the broader range of music in Civ 5, also the speech, I think just adds to that, sense of culture, We have a studio that we work with in Montreal, a fabulous Wave Generation, that for Civ 4, they recorded all the languages for the units. When you selected them, they would say, like, what'll it be, in their language. So we knew we had this resource that could find any language we could come up with. So we went to them and basically they found actors for us, and we directed them from here, and it came out great. Most of the in-house music is the leader music, and most of that was written by myself and Jeff. Ian's writing one, and Roland Rizzo is also writing a piece, one of the leaders. Basically, we decided that we would use existing themes to base these pieces on. And Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Usually our first step is just searching for something, finding an actual melody from the culture that we're doing the leader music for, and hoping that melody is famous enough in that culture that if someone from that country heard it, they would instantly think, oh yeah, this is my country, and there'd be that sense of national pride. Some of the countries we just had to find fragments, like ancient Rome. I think Michael just found these very, very old fragments of melodies, pieced together a piece from that. So we kind of find the source material and then combine it with the Western orchestra, and it ends up being this combination of Western influenced with different cultures. And actually there's a final step for a lot of the music. We're actually going to be recording it in Prague, which is really cool. So
we've written probably over 3 hours of original music for leaders in this game. And I think about an hour and 45 minutes worth of music is actually going to be recorded live with an orchestra. and a few pieces with choir.
Civilization V is the first game in the series to use Steamworks. Among other things, this has allowed the developers to make the multiplayer experience better than ever before.
In terms of multiplayer, something that I think people will find really exciting is our use of Steam, and this is something that's new. Previous Civ games have come out on Steam, but they haven't been integrated with Steam like Civ 5 is. It uses it for matchmaking, for friends, for achievements. There's just, it's all centralized, it's all solid, it's going to be a really good thing for the multiplayer community.
Multiplayer's always been important to Civilization 5. I mean, there's just a huge audience out there of people playing constantly, especially in Civilization 4. There's entire communities built around having tournaments, even, what is it now, 4 or 5 years since the release of the last one?
Yeah, 5.
It's huge, and they have these sites that have modded the game in such a way that all the reporting comes straight into the websites. It's just ongoing, so extremely important.
Modding has been a part of the Civilization series since Civilization 2. For Civ 5, the team was dedicated in making it the most moddable Civ game ever.
Modding is definitely a huge part of Civ, especially with Civ 4. That team did a really excellent job with the features, and the priority with Civ 4 was to make as much as possible moddable. We wanted to build on that and keep the power, but also to allow more casual modders who aren't as hardcore into that modding scene to go and make changes as well. So one particular component that we're really excited about is the new World Builder. It's a standalone application that is very easy to use. You can fire it up. You can add and remove things very, very, very quickly. The whole program is super speedy. You can undo and redo things. It's just very easy to use, and it's something that personally I was really excited when I saw how it was coming along.
And more than any other version of Civ, we're focusing on making this the most powerful, elegant, and easy to use tool we possibly can. So I personally have spent quite a bit of time working on the interface, making sure that it's easy to get into, making sure it's powerful, and most importantly, making sure it's flexible. The World Builder will respond to your mod. It will know what items you have in your mod and will allow you to determine what extra information you might want to save out with your file. So your maps are as customizable as the game itself.
One of the other tools we have is a tool called Mod Buddy, and it's basically the tool that brings all of the mod files together. It's the interaction between the user and the community hub. It's a way for them to figure out how they're going to set up their scenarios, how they're going to define the gameplay rules, and how they're going to organize all of their map files that they built using the other tools. It's also their direct link to uploading to the in-game community hub. The Civ community has been pretty much vital to the development of this Civ and previous Civs. They are the driving force behind Civ, I would say.
Civ 5 to me is really an acknowledgement of the Civ community. It's something that people have been asking for, have been kind of waiting, when is this coming out. I think it really is a reflection of how strong the community is out there, how many ideas they've generated, how they've kind of inspired us to be creative and try new things with Civilization. So it's really the fact that there's this very active, dynamic, and interactive community out there that kind of inspires us to do new versions of Civilization, because they've given us a lot of great feedback, a lot of love on Civ 4, but now they're kind of ready for the next iteration, and that's what Civ 5 represents.